Ronan Vale froze for a moment, grease staining his hands, sweat running down his forehead under the bright afternoon sun. The group of men standing near the luxury car dealership across the street weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing at him. A single dad. A struggling mechanic. A man whose faded work shirt had been washed so many times that the company logo had nearly disappeared. They saw a man who worked 12-hour shifts and still worried about paying rent. They saw someone easy to mock. What they didn't see was the heart of a father who had sacrificed everything for his son. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances no matter where they come from, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration, leave a comment, and subscribe to the Dad Chronicles. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. The laughter continued as Ronan bent down to pick up the wrench. He ignored it the same way he ignored most insults these days. Life had taught him that arguing with people who judged you was like shouting into the wind. 3 years earlier, everything had changed. His wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone with their 6-year-old son, Callum. The grief had nearly destroyed him. There were nights when he sat beside Callum's bed listening to the boy cry himself to sleep because he missed his mother. There were mornings when Ronan dragged himself out of bed after only 2 hours of sleep because rent still needed to be paid. There were countless moments when he felt like giving up. But every time he looked into his son's eyes, he found a reason to keep moving. The little auto repair shop where he worked wasn't glamorous. The paint was peeling. The waiting room furniture was old. The roof leaked whenever it rained. But it provided enough money to keep food on the table. Barely. That particular Tuesday afternoon seemed destined to be ordinary. The sun was bright. Traffic moved steadily. Customers came and went. Then everything changed. Ronan was replacing brake pads when he noticed a teenage girl standing beside a small silver sedan parked on the shoulder of the road. At first he assumed someone was coming to help her. But nearly 20 minutes passed. The girl remained there. Cars drove by. Nobody stopped. Eventually he noticed something else. She was crying. Not quietly. Not trying to hide it. She looked completely overwhelmed. Ronan wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward her. As he approached, he noticed she couldn't have been older than 16 or 17. Her face was streaked with tears. Her phone battery appeared dead. And one tire on the sedan was completely flat. The teenager looked frightened and exhausted. Ronan learned her name was Kaylin Mercer. She had been driving home from a school event when the tire blew out. Her phone had died. She didn't know how to change a tire. Several people had driven past. Nobody stopped. A few had even laughed. The fear and frustration had finally become too much. Without hesitation, Ronan got to work. The sun beat down relentlessly. His knees pressed against hot pavement. His work clothes became dirtier than ever. But he never complained. Kaylin watched in silence as the mechanic carefully replaced the damaged tire. What struck her wasn't his skill. It was his kindness. There was no impatience. No judgment. No expectation of payment. Just a man helping someone who needed help. By the time the tire was replaced, nearly 40 minutes had passed. Ronan checked everything twice to make sure she would be safe. Then he handed back the keys. Kaylin offered the little cash she had in her wallet. He refused. She insisted. He refused again. The look of relief on her face was payment enough. As she drove away, Ronan returned to the shop and thought little more about it. Helping people wasn't unusual for him. He simply did what he hoped someone would do for his own child someday. That night, he returned home to their tiny apartment. Callum greeted him at the door with a drawing he'd made at school. The picture showed the two of them standing together under a giant sun. The words written beneath it nearly brought Ronan to tears. "My dad is my hero." For a man who felt like he failed every day, those words meant everything. The next morning began like any other. Coffee. Bills. Work. Worry. Then around 10 o'clock, a sleek black luxury SUV pulled into the repair shop parking lot. Every employee turned to stare. Vehicles like that never came to their neighborhood. The driver stepped out first. Then a woman emerged from the rear passenger seat. The entire atmosphere shifted. She carried herself with confidence. Not arrogance. Confidence. Her tailored clothing, elegant appearance, and composed demeanor immediately stood out. Yet what caught Ronan's attention most was the expression in her eyes. She seemed deeply emotional. The woman introduced herself as Celine Mercer. And then she said something that left him speechless. She was Kaylan's mother. The girl whose tire he had changed the previous afternoon. Ronan assumed she had come to thank him. Instead, tears began forming in her eyes. What followed stunned everyone present. Celine explained that Kaylan had not merely experienced a flat tire. She had been suffering through one of the hardest periods of her life. Months earlier, Kaylan had lost her father. The grief had consumed her. She had withdrawn from friends. Stopped smiling. Stopped believing people cared. The previous day had been especially difficult because it marked her father's birthday. The tire incident had happened after an emotional school event that reminded her of him. By the time Ronan found her, she had already spent hours feeling abandoned and alone. When she arrived home that evening, something remarkable happened. For the first time in months, Kaylan smiled. Not because of the tire. Not because the problem was solved. Because a stranger had shown her kindness when she desperately needed it. She spent the entire evening talking about the mechanic who helped her. The man who expected nothing in return. The man who treated her with compassion. The man who reminded her that good people still existed. Celine's voice cracked as she spoke. She admitted that after losing her husband, she too had started losing faith in people. Business associates cared about money. Friends disappeared. Many relationships proved shallow. Yet one struggling mechanic had accomplished something no therapist or motivational speech had managed. He gave her daughter hope. The shop had become completely silent. Every employee listened. Every customer listened. Even the men who often mocked Ronan stood quietly nearby. Then Celine revealed something nobody expected. She was one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the state. Her technology company had grown into a billion-dollar enterprise. Money was never an issue. But genuine kindness was rare. And she never forgot people who changed her family's life. Over the following weeks, an unexpected friendship formed. Celine occasionally brought Kaylan to the repair shop. Callum and Kaylan bonded surprisingly quickly. Though several years apart in age, both understood loss. Both understood loneliness. Both understood what it felt like to miss someone who would never come home again. The friendship helped them heal. For the first time in years, Ronan felt surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Months passed. Business remained difficult. Inflation increased costs. Customers became scarce. The landlord raised rent. Eventually Ronan received devastating news. The repair shop was closing. The owner simply couldn't keep it running. One afternoon, Ronan sat alone inside the nearly empty garage staring at stacks of unpaid bills. The future looked terrifying. He wondered how he would support Callum. How he would afford rent. How he would survive. For the first time since losing his wife, hopelessness returned. Then his phone rang. It was Celine. She asked him to meet her the following morning. Nothing more. Just trust her. The next day, Ronan arrived at an industrial property on the edge of town. Dozens of people were gathered. Construction crews. Business executives. Community leaders. Confused, he waited. Then Celine stepped onto a temporary stage. What happened next left him completely overwhelmed. Months earlier, after learning the repair shop was struggling, Celine had quietly begun planning something extraordinary. Using her own resources and working with local investors, she had purchased the property. The building behind her had been transformed into a state-of-the-art automotive center. Modern equipment. Training facilities. Scholarship programs for young mechanics. Employment opportunities for struggling parents. Everything designed around one mission. Helping hardworking people build better futures. Then she revealed the final surprise. The entire center would be operated by one person. Ronan Vale. Tears filled his eyes immediately. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. Hundreds of people applauded as Celine explained her reasoning. Businesses often celebrated profits. But communities were built by character. The man standing before them had changed a grieving teenager's life without asking for recognition. He represented the kind of leadership money could never buy. The crowd erupted into cheers. Many people cried openly. Among them stood Callum. His face glowed with pride. The little boy clutched the same drawing he had made months earlier. My dad is my hero. Only now everyone else could see it too. The years that followed transformed countless lives. The Automotive Center became one of the most respected vocational programs in the region. Single parents found jobs. Young people discovered careers. Families received second chances. And at the heart of it all stood a mechanic who once believed he was invisible. But perhaps the most beautiful change happened inside Ronan himself. For years he had measured success by bank accounts and unpaid bills. Now he understood something far more important. True wealth wasn't money. It was impact. It was kindness. It was showing up for someone when everyone else drove past. Years later, Kaylin would tell audiences that a flat tire changed her life. Not because of the inconvenience. Because it introduced her to proof that compassion still existed. And Ronan would always smile when he heard that story. Because he never set out to become a hero. He simply chose kindness when it mattered. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in the power of compassion, leave a comment, and subscribe to the Dad Chronicles for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act of compassion can create a ripple effect that reaches people you may never even meet. As the sun set over the automotive center one quiet evening, Ronan stood outside watching Callum laugh with friends. The golden daylight stretched across the parking lot, warm and bright, nothing like the dark days he once feared would never end. He realized that life rarely changes because of grand moments. More often, it changes because someone chooses to stop, to care, and to help. A crying teenager on the side of the road. A struggling father trying his best. A grieving family searching for hope. Their paths crossed for only a moment, yet that moment changed everything. And somewhere in the distance, as the last rays of daylight painted the sky, it felt as though the universe was quietly reminding everyone of a simple truth: the smallest acts of kindness often create the greatest miracles.